Your dog has off days that don't match anything that you did, and it's starting to mess with your confidence. Welcome to The Dog Who Asked for More, a podcast for dog parents navigating the messy, complicated parts of life with dogs that no one really prepares you for. Each week, you'll hear honest, rounded conversations that help you understand your dog more clearly, feel less alone in the challenges you're facing, and strengthen the relationship you're building together. I'm Em, a dog mom, former vet tech, dog trainer, and canine nutritionist who works with overwhelmed dog parents who love their dogs deeply but feel stuck, burned out, or unsure what their dog actually needs. And today we're talking about those days where nothing went wrong, but everything feels harder. When your dog is more reactive than usual, more sensitive, less able to settle, and you start running through everything in your head, did I miss something? Did we do enough? Is this something I caused? Because it doesn't make sense. Nothing in your routine changed, nothing obvious happened, and still your dog just feels off. And this is where it starts to mess with you because when behavior doesn't feel predictable, it starts to feel like you're the problem, like you're missing something, like you should have caught it sooner. Like if you were doing this right, it wouldn't be happening. I see this a lot with people who are paying attention, people who are doing the work, who care deeply about their dogs. And instead of feeling more confident over time, they feel more unsure because the harder they try, the less consistent it feels. I remember going through this with Fitz. Days where his reactions felt bigger than the situation, where he couldn't settle even after things that normally helped had been applied. And I would sit there thinking, what am I missing? Because we were doing everything we were supposed to be doing, and it still didn't feel right. And what made it harder was it wasn't consistent. It would show up and then it would disappear again. And that's the part that really gets in your head because you can't fix something that you can't even track. You adjust things, you try to get ahead of it, and still you feel like you're just guessing. There was a point where I started realizing this didn't feel like a training issue. It felt like something underneath everything else was changing how he was able to move through the world. And I didn't know what it was yet. But here's where I was getting it wrong. I kept looking at behavior like it started in the moment. Like if something felt off, the answer had to be what I was doing right then. More structure, more awareness, more control over the situation. But none of it was actually changing how he felt overall. And what I didn't realize yet was that I was only looking at what I could see. Because when I started seeing a similar pattern with Toby, a completely different dog with completely different behaviors and still off in his own ways, that is when it stopped feeling random. Fitz would get more reactive and Toby would withdraw. And for a while, I treated those as separate problems with separate explanations, but they weren't. And this is where things began to shift. Not all at once, but enough to realize this wasn't about what was happening in the moment. It was about what was happening underneath it. Because behavior doesn't exist on its own. It reflects what the body is able to handle. And when something internally feels off, you see it everywhere. Tolerance drops. Recovery takes longer. Reactions get bigger. Settling gets harder. And for a long time, I didn't connect that to food because food felt separate, like it was just feeding, not something that could affect behavior in a way you'd actually notice day to day until I started paying attention to the patterns. Not one moment, not one reaction, patterns. Days where everything felt tighter, less flexible, less forgiving, less stable. And when I started looking at what was going into them, not what it was labeled as, not what it promised, but how it was actually affecting them, that is when things started to make sense. Not perfectly, but enough to realize those off days weren't so random after all. And they weren't something that I caused in the moment. They were signals. And this is how it shows up for a lot of dogs. Not something obvious, but as those days where everything just feels harder than it should. Walks feel heavier, reactions come faster, settling takes longer, and you're left trying to figure out what changed when nothing looks different. So here's the question I want to leave you with. What if the thing affecting your dog isn't happening in the moment at all? Because this isn't about doing something wrong, and it's not about needing to overhaul everything overnight. Sometimes it's just about realizing behavior doesn't exist in isolation. And when something feels off, there's usually a reason underneath it, even if you haven't found it yet. And if this is something you've been trying to figure out, if dog food labels feel confusing or leave you wondering what actually matters, the Dog Food Label Decoder Quiz will help you understand what to look for and where to start. The link is in the episode description. So be kind, spread joy, and remember, behavior doesn't exist in a vacuum.